Good Thursday morning, everyone. Welcome back to Weather on the Go, all your weather coverage. In today's video, I will be covering my December weather forecast with you. In this video, we'll be going week by week here through December, showing you the weather pattern and how much cold and snow we could be seeing throughout the United States as we go through each week here in December. If you guys are new here to the channel and have yet to subscribe, hit the subscribe button down below. It's free to do, and you get all of my weather content here on this channel. I cover Canada, the United States, and the tropics here on this channel, so it's something you do not want to miss. So hit the subscribe button down below to get all of my daily weather forecast updates, as well as that notification bell, again, to get all of my daily weather forecast updates here on this channel. So looking here at your Nino index, this is the La Nina we are in here. The positive values, that is an El Nino. The zero value here is ENSO neutral conditions, and then the negative values here are La Nina conditions. So right now, you definitely see we are actually in a moderate La Nina, or nearing a moderate La Nina. And we've been kind of borderline a moderate La Nina all the way back through November here, and even really getting back here close to moderate La Nina status going back to October as well. So we've been kind of hovering back and forth, between the -1 on the index here. And what this means is that the colder waters over the equatorial Pacific Ocean here are still cool enough to where we are still seeing those La Nina conditions. That looks to continue here roughly through probably most of the winter time, especially through December, probably even going into January and even early on February as well. So let's kind of look at the consolidation of all the climate models that we have out there to see where this La Nina is going here. And it's really not going anywhere anytime soon. You can see all of these consolidation of the models here. The climate models are showing this La Nina continuing all the way through the winter months before starting to get back ever so slightly closer to the ENSO neutral conditions here at 0 as we get towards early spring, if not very late winter. So that will be something to keep an eye on as we kind of get a little bit closer to February and even that March timeframe moving forward. So what does a La Nina winter look like here? So we got a polar jet to the north. This is your polar jet stream here up and over portions of Alaska. You got a high pressure system, a blocking high pressure system, usually across the northern and northeastern Pacific Ocean. Up and over top of that, you have a polar jet stream pulling down that cold air from Canada here, especially western and central Canada, down into the United States. We also do have a pretty active subtropical jet and also a Pacific jet stream here from the west and southwest that'll actually be pumping in some of the specific moisture. And usually, every once in a while, some of these systems do start to phase together as the Pacific jet stream or the subtropical jet and the polar jet stream do phase across the central United States, and that brings a wetter pattern to the Ohio Valley and Tennessee River valleys, but a drier pattern underneath that here across the desert Southwest and parts of the Gulf Coast. So that is something to watch. And I did not want to exclude, yes, the Pacific Northwest is very wet in this pattern as well, as we see a lot of those storm systems here entering the Pacific Northwest from Canada or the Pacific Ocean here, bringing lots of rainfall and lots of snowfall as well in these La Nina winters here as we move forward. So right now you're going to look at a bunch of charts here. This is just your AO index. This is the Arctic Oscillation Index here. And what you see on this index here, it's very small to see, but you see on the negative side of things as we get through December, that means we're going to be pulling down a lot of this cold air. When you have negative values, that means the polar vortex is going to be activated, and that's going to be pulling itself southward here with either a polar vortex stretching event, a polar vortex disruption, or even a stratospheric warming event is definitely not out of the realm of possibility, especially as we get closer here towards the end of December, as these values really plummet to -4, -5, even -6 here, or even stronger than that, possibly even -7 as we get towards late December. So that will be something to keep an eye on here. And then again, the consolidation of all the GEF ensembles here does show that moving down towards the negative values on each of these ensembles as we move through the next 10 to 20 days here in December. Looking also here at another index, this is the PNA. This is the Pacific North American Index, and this is actually key to why we're seeing that cold air move southward from Canada. We also have that moving towards neutral, if not positive values here, and that means that we're going to have warmer conditions here across the desert Southwest, which will actually translate to drier weather as well, and that will also pull down some of that cold air from Canada and into the United States with time as well, especially as these values move up towards zero and then into the positive territory on the PNA. So looking here at the polar vortex, so we got to understand what the polar vortex does here, especially getting into the winter months now. This is the first day of meteorological winter. And we definitely have to keep an eye on what we call a polar vortex. What the polar vortex is we have cold air and a low pressure usually near the pole, the North Pole area here up into northern Canada, Greenland, and getting up here into the Arctic area. This is going to be pulled southward with the jet stream. Sometimes we have a very erratic polar jet stream here with a lot of ripples in the jet stream, and every once in a while we have enough of a ripple in the jet stream to pull this polar vortex farther south, again, in a stretching event and a disruption or even a stratospheric warming event. That is something we'll have to watch through the month of December, periodically here through the month as well. And again, this jet stream is key to how far south it goes, will be how far south some of that cold air moves, especially getting through December. So let's look here the first full week in December, shall we? So we're going from December 1st through the 8th time frame here. So the first full week of December, including today, we have all that cold air across western Canada into the Pacific Northwest. And again, all that warmer anomalies showing up across the southern and southeastern United States and moving up the East Coast. That's basically what we're seeing right now, and that really looks to carry us here through most of the first week in December. Most of this cold air is going to be bottled up here to the north and west, but it will still be very cold at times across the upper Midwest, the northern plains, and the Pacific Northwest here as we get through the first week of December. And you can see that here verifying with the northern hemispheric look here. You can definitely see the Arctics are very active. You have the polar jet here to the north, and you definitely have all that cold air starting to sink southward here into the United States with a blocking pattern across the northeastern Pacific Ocean, and also a blocking pattern here across portions of Greenland, getting into the western Atlantic as well. So in between there, we have that polar vortex, and it's going to start to stretch and get disrupted and push a little bit farther here to the south, and that will include places here like the Pacific Northwest, the northern plains, and the upper Midwest. Now we have to look at the precipitation for this time frame. So not only will we have that cold air pushing south, but we have to look at how much snowfall we could see with that, with the cold air up across the northern plains, the upper Midwest, and the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, we could be talking about a lot of mountain snowfall across places like Oregon, Washington, Idaho, getting back into much of the north central Colorado Rockies. Definitely could be talking about some feet of snowfall here through the next, 5, 6, 7 days, and maybe even some heavier rains moving into California and Nevada, where they desperately need the moisture there. We're going to see some nice replenishment here to the Sierra Nevadas and California, but we'll also have an active pattern with that subtropical jet being activated across the Ohio and Tennessee river valleys. You can see the green anomaly showing up here. I do expect potentially a heavier rain event here as we get towards the end of the first week in December, maybe some snow mixing in here on the northern side, and we could also see some snow events up here into southeastern and eastern Canada that will kind of bleed into the northeast as well. We could have a few inches of snow here through the first week in December across those areas. This is the overall storm track of what I think will happen from December 1st today through December 7th. Again, most of these storm tracks here are going to be from west to east here as we go from the Pacific Northwest through the Central Plains and across the Ohio Valley. To the north of this track, we'll probably see more snowfall. To the south of this track, more rainfall, maybe some more severe weather events. And then maybe some ice and some sleet, freezing rain starting to mix in here right along that track here as well across the Missouri Valley, getting into the central Ohio Valley during the first week here in December. Now looking at the second week in December, this is December 8th through the 15th time frame, and you can see much more cold air starting to sink its way a little bit farther to the south, this time potentially getting as far south as the Red River in Texas, maybe getting as far south as the Mid-South as well. Much of the lower 48 is going to be cold, in exception to the far southeast here across Florida, getting into the Carolinas and Georgia. We're still going to be above normal, I think, as we get into the second week here in December. And this is all complements of that polar vortex starting to kind of stretch and get disrupted yet again as we get into the second week in December. Another disruption event is likely And that will pull all this colder air to the south. Again, the blocking pattern up across the Aleutian Islands and into the northeastern Pacific. We have another blocking pattern across Greenland here into the northwestern Atlantic, and that will send all that colder air southward into the United States. This time, probably a lot farther south as well. And this will set up an active pattern where I do think a lot of this storm systems will originate in northeast Texas and actually travel up through the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys. And the northwest side of those storm tracks, even though you see the orange and yellow anomalies here, I do still feel that we'll start to see heavier snow events start to become a little bit more focused across the Illinois Valley, getting up into the Great Lakes and portions there of the upper Midwest. More rain events, maybe some severe weather on the southern side of these storms in the warm sector across portions of the Tennessee Valley, the southeast, and again, probably some more dry weather in Florida. Some drier weather across the west coast, but we still could have some active storms here going into the second week in December. This is what I think the overall storm track will be going from December 8th through December 15th, really just kind of originating from the southern four corners across North Texas and then driving its way northeast across the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys, kind of the golden path, if you will, for heavier snow events potentially setting up across the Missouri, Illinois valleys and getting up here into the Great Lakes, potentially some heavier snow events there. But then as we get into the third week here in December, things start to get really interesting here from December 15th through December 22nd, 23rd timeframe. We definitely see all that cold air remaining in place, locked in just east of the Rocky Mountains here across most of the central and eastern United States. We start to see that positive P&A start to take over here where we have those positive values, a lot of anomalies showing up here with warmer than normal conditions across California, Nevada, getting into the Pacific Northwest here and then even down into the Four Corners region with that positive P&A, and that will send all of this colder air farther to the south across the central and eastern United States, and that is, again, complements of that polar vortex. This time, I do think we could have a stratospheric warming event here going into the third week in December. That's where we start to see a kind of a delay in that. I think the start of this will be in the second week in December, and then the stratospheric warming here will translate to all that cold air pushing down to the surface from the stratosphere all the way down to the surface here, and we'll feel that as we get to the third week here in December across the Northeast, especially getting into the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and potentially as far south as the Carolinas as we get to the third week here in December. And it looks like kind of more of a normal storm track pattern as we get into the third week in December. No one really kind of above or below normal, kind of just a normal December pattern as we get into the third week in December. So that is something we'll watch. And that's more kind of in line with what I think more of a storm track from Canada into the United States around that polar vortex as we have that stratospheric warming event into the third week, I think, in December. We're going to have more clipper type systems, the Alberta clippers and some of those clipper systems coming out of Saskatchewan, Alberta, Canada, moving down across the northern plains into the Midwest. The northeastern side of these clippers will be more of the snowfall type variety. A little bit farther to the southwest toward the Four Corners, the southern plains, the mid-south, we could see more rainfall, maybe some snow mixing in every once in a while with some of that colder air as it pushes south. But again, maybe some lighter snow events during this time. But then as we get into the very last week in December, this really just sticks around. We still have that stratospheric warming event still continuing and potentially even getting disrupted with the polar vortex again. We have all that cold air to the east of the Rocky Mountains here across much of the Canadian provinces, getting down into the lower 48 across the eastern two-thirds of the United States. That positive P&A really taking over. We have the warmer conditions across the west coast, especially into California, into Nevada, getting into portions of the Rockies here, and that's going to be that positive P&A that we look for here. And again, it'll send all that colder air farther south into the United States. And again, we have those values, negative values across portions of eastern Canada into the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and the Northeast, with that positive P&A starting to take over here and really start to make its way down into the United States as we get into that last week here in December. What that will do is kind of make for a more of a drier pattern across the southern and southwestern United States, even across the Pacific Northwest. We might kind of shut off some of that moisture. We might have some moisture trickling up here into portions of southern Alaska, western Canada, but it might have a hard time reaching the Pacific Northwest here. But it looks like, again, more clipper type systems, more hybrid type of snow systems across the northern and central United States we have to watch out for. with a couple different storm tracks as we get toward around that Christmas time frame and going in toward New Year's Eve. I do think we'll still have those clipper type systems moving southeast from Canada, those Alberta and Saskatchewan type clippers from Canada moving from northwest to southeast with those lighter snow events, and a Pacific jet stream that'll be pretty active as well to the north of there. We could have some heavier snow events if we can get some more Pacific moisture into the United States here from west to east as we go into the last week in December. Overall, this is the NOAA Climate Prediction Center's monthly temperature outlook here for December of 2022. This was just released yesterday, and you can see below normal temperatures are very likely across especially the Pacific Northwest, the Northern Plains, and the Upper Midwest, where we have slightly to maybe even moderately above normal temperatures across the southern United States, really centered on New Mexico, Texas, getting across the Gulf Coast regions into Florida. And you can see with the precipitation outlook as well for December, very active across the west, the Pacific Northwest overall, especially into Northern California, Southern Oregon, and Western Nevada there. A little bit of a dry slot in between. Again, we still will have some snow and some rainfall and ice storms potentially in between, but I do think we're still going to be a little bit more below average around the Chicago area, getting back toward Des Moines, Iowa, getting back into northwest Texas as well. A very heavy rain event or snow event could set up across the Ohio Valley. That would be favoring some above normal precipitation there as we get into December, and then again drier in Florida and the southeast here as we get across the Carolinas, Georgia, and southern Alabama going through December, and pretty much a normal December across portions of the Northeast as we go through the entirety of the month. So looking here at the U.S. monthly drought outlook here going through all of December, it does look like we're going to add to the drought across the Southeast here. Some drought development is very likely across much of eastern Georgia, getting into the Carolinas. That will be expanding eastward. Some of the drought removal will be likely across the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys, getting back into northeast Texas, Arkansas. That's where we're going to see some of those heavier rain and snow events potentially starting to relieve some of that drought across those areas. But it does look like the severe, extreme, and exceptional drought will continue to maintain across the Rockies, the Central Plains, getting back across the West, even though we have a lot of that rainfall across the West. It's going to be a big deficit to overcome, and I do still think we're going to see that drought persist through the month of December across much of the central and western United States. So here are my thoughts on my December weather forecast for you guys here in 2022. I think there's going to be lots of rain and snow across the Pacific Northwest, places like Washington, Oregon, western Montana, getting into Idaho here, and down especially into California, those Sierra Nevadas. Lots of rain and snow, especially the heavier snows and feet of snow across those higher elevations in the Sierra Nevadas. Lots of snowfall, I think, across the northern plains, getting into the upper Midwest, places like the Twin Cities, getting back into Rapid City here, Bismarck. Some of these areas could see lots of snowfall, maybe even a blizzard potentially toward the end of December. We'll have to continue to watch that, but lots of snowfall there, lots of cold. To the south of there, I still expect a few snowstorms here across the Colorado Rockies, getting over toward the Illinois, Missouri Valley, and then portions of the central and western Ohio Valley here. We could be seeing some heavier snowstorms from time to time across this area. I'm not expecting a lot of big snow events, but a couple of snow events are possible across these areas. Very dry across the southern and southwestern United States into southern California, southern Nevada, much of Arizona and New Mexico there into the panhandle of Texas. I do really think some dry conditions will continue, especially as that positive PNA comes back toward the end of December and starts to take hold across those areas. Down here into East Texas, getting into much of Oklahoma, the Mid-South, extending over toward the Tennessee Valley. I do expect a few cold shots here, a few cold spells across this area, maybe some snowfall mixing in from time to time. More rain events than snow events, but I think as we get later into December with that polar vortex really taking hold across the central and eastern United States, I do expect more cold snaps and potentially some more snow across even northeast Texas and the deep south. Very dry, even drier across the immediate southeast, across southern Alabama, the Carolinas, Georgia there, and even Florida. I think a lot of dry weather expected there. There will be some rain from time to time, but overall, a very dry December forecast I'm expecting across those areas. And then finally here across the Great Lakes, the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, a very cold, very snowy December. A lot of these storm systems will be originating out west, but will track across the country and produce maybe a nor'easter here later in December. We'll have to wait and see how we, maybe the I-95 corridor, we see some heavier snowfall, but definitely some very cold, very frigid conditions, especially if that polar vortex does come to fruition, especially with any of those disruptions or stratospheric warming events to end the month of December. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed the video, like it down below by giving it a thumbs up. Leave any comments, questions, and concerns below. I'll get to those later on today. And most importantly, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Helps to grow this channel very much so. Thanks to all the new subscribers out there. I definitely appreciate it. Also hit that notification bell to get all of my daily weather forecast updates here on this channel. Definitely appreciate it. Everybody have a great Thursday, a great first day of December, and I'll see you all in the next video.